Coming up on this episode of Harmless.
She said, "Pappy, are you going to save that little girl?" Something clicked in my head and said, those kids are real. When I'm doing this stuff, I put on my playlist. I told them that's a bad idea. Bad idea. You do not want one of your favorite songs associated with this video of someone raping a kid. I come home that Friday, my gun's there on the end table, and I'm listening to music. After this song is over, I'm going to kill myself. The phone rings, call it fate, God, whatever you want to call it. I answered the phone. There should not be any other people like me. It's too much. There's so much stuff wrong in my brain that shouldn't be. If you look into hell long enough, the devil's going to look back. I have seen pure evil. I've seen pure evil, so there has to be pure good. There just has to be.
Welcome to Harmless, the podcast. I'm your host, Eric Oldenburg. And today, my guest is a man named Kevin Laws. Kevin is the author of a book called Hunter of the Damned, A Walk Through Hell. Now, Kevin Laws is a retired Homeland Security Investigations special agent who spent many years, in the early years, chatting online undercover. I don't want to give too much away about Kevin's story, but during his career, not only did he suffer the mental strain, stress, and toll this job can take, but at the same time, he suffered an incredible personal loss that drove him to the darkest of places. I'm so thankful for Kevin's willingness to talk and his vulnerability about how this affected him personally, because he knows his story can potentially help another human being in distress. A quick disclaimer before I play this interview. This interview goes into some very candid descriptions of child exploitation investigations and the mindset of predators, as well as topics related to suicide. But Kevin's vulnerability and willingness to talk about this can potentially save other human beings' lives. And for that, I am eternally grateful. So without further ado, I give you A Walk Through Hell with Kevin Laws. First off, I want to say welcome to you, Kevin, for being here and being willing to be so candid and vulnerable, not only in this interview, but in the book that you have authored, Hunter of the Damned, A Walk Through Hell. Hunter of the Damned is an account of Kevin's career with Homeland Security Investigations. He spent more than 11 years as an online undercover agent, and his work has led to arrests of some of the worst offenders you could possibly imagine. The book kind of delves into that and the challenges faced by Kevin throughout his career. So Kevin, welcome. I don't want to give away the details of the book. Some of the stories in there are very compelling and very raw, but I'd just like to get your story. Kevin, tell me, how did you get into this? How did you become Kevin Laws, author of Hunter of the Damned?
First, let me say, Eric, I'm pleased to be here, happy to be here. I think this is an important message and everybody should get it out. I am not the politically correct person. You asked me a question, you're getting brutal honesty. This is not the topic to sugarcoat because that's just ridiculous.
Amen.
But how did I get started? That's a good question. In Yuma, Arizona in 1997, another agent came to me and said, "Hey, you want to help me?" Back then, it was U.S. Customs. It didn't come to HSI until I got up to Alaska in 2003. I started in Fort Pierce, Florida in 89. 89 to 95, I was a Marine enforcement officer. Miami Vice, driving the speedboats. Yeah, it was not. All the good stuff happened in Miami. We was in Fort Pierce where we went out and looked at the ocean rise and fall. But then I took a promotion as a special agent out to Arizona. We're doing the quote unquote bag and tags with people bringing drugs across the border. And then another agent comes to me and he says, "Hey, I have this investigation and I'm posting ads in swinger magazines." It was a big newspaper. And the first part of the newspaper had to do with sex and drugs and rock and roll. And the back, a few pages, had to do with want ads. He was posting ads in the back, and I won't go into what the ad said, but looking for people that had a predilection to molesting children. So once a month, we would go in to the XXX bookstore. I'd never been in one before. It's just like you see on TV where you go in and it's like the sticky floor and the people in the trench coats.
I worked Vice for 2 years, so I can absolutely attest to the creepy people and the sticky floors, for sure.
But I'm shocked because what TV shows and then what's real life, you're like, oh, that's probably nonsense. No, it's not. So we would go in and the other agent would pick up one of the magazines and we're just paging through and you have to go through the list of ads until ours has been published, and then we'd start checking the P.O. box. Yes, that's right, the post office box. And then if somebody wrote a letter, we'd literally get a pen, write a letter to the person and say, hey, if you happen to have electronic mail, wasn't even abbreviated yet, if you happen to have electronic mail, we can communicate that way. So that's what we would do. And then people would travel down to Yuma to meet up with the undercover, and we would arrest them. And it was actually pretty exciting.
I remember from the book that you walked into your boss's office and he said something to you, or he asked you a question. What was that?
Yeah. Hey, Kevin, do you want to go to this school? He spurts out this big long name, and I'm like, no. For some reason, he thought I knew about computers because I guess I knew how to turn it on and I could type 2 fingers and not make too many errors. He's like, too bad. I put your name in for it anyhow. I'm like, all right, whatever. So literally like a year later, he comes back. He says, remember that school I put you in for last year? And I'm like, really, dude? I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. It was basic computer evidence recovery training. And I was in class 3. It's put on by Customs, IRS, and the Marshals. So each agency got 8 slots. So it was a mixed class. But the instructor was like a damn computer scientist. He was at the front of the class going, and this bit goes into that byte, and this bus drives you home. And I'm sitting in the back drooling on myself going, dude, I don't know what he's talking about. I am so lost. So lost. But thankfully, there's another guy in the class. He actually got us through it. I called it the idiot group. After class, we'd come down to my room, hotel room, right? And there'd be 6 or 7 of us in there. And Jeff would come in and be like, all right, let's recap what happened. And he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He could break it down to normal 5th grade speak. Right. And that's the only reason I passed the class. Yeah. So after that, then once the internet hit, then child pornography, because back then that's what we called it.
Yeah,
it was child
absolutely.
pornography or child porn. So I started working at, my name got out really fast because Yuma is really small. And they're like, if you have a child pornography case, Kevin's the guy to talk to. He knows all about these cases. And I'm like, okay, so I've worked with one case, so I guess I'm the expert now. And I started working with a local FBI agent, and we jokingly called ourselves the Arizona Child Pornography Task Force, the 2 of us. His name was Kevin Pakolnevics. Yeah, common spelling on that. And he was a great guy. We got along fabulously. And anytime a case came up, if he had something or if I had something, we'd be working it together. And some interesting stuff happened. And at that time, computer forensics was brand new. So nobody knew really what the hell they were doing or what to expect. And I remember one investigation, we're hitting the house. The rule was if you weren't in the briefing, the pre-raid briefing, then you don't go on the raid. That's the rules. That was hard and fast. And I just assumed that everybody knew what to do with computers because stupid me. And I remember going into the house and one of the agents comes walking out of the bedroom with the computer stacked up and he's carrying it out and say, okay, what do I do with this? And I'm like, dude, we're supposed to take pictures of that and I need to look at it and all this stuff. And after that, I'm like, all right, note to self, don't assume people know what to do with computers because guess what? It's new to them too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Funny. Where did you go from there?
Nobody knew to seize the computer because it was new. So so people just didn't know. I remember they asked me to go on a raid for drugs, and I remember going into the computer or going in and there's a computer there and there's somebody sitting at the desk just surfing through the computer. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? I'm searching the computer. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. What do you mean? And I said,
testing the cocaine.
Yes. And I had one investigation that I wasn't directly involved as an agent in. This was in Arizona that I did the forensics on. And it was a teacher who had set up a camera in a storage room in his classroom to preschool kids and was raping the kids in the closet during class and filming it in the closet there. But he was using some fantastic encryption and we never did break it. But he did eventually got convicted. Actually, that was the first time I testified as an expert witness in state court. And that was interesting because it didn't go well for me.
Why not?
I went to grand jury the prosecutor had asked me a question, and I gave the answer. And then when I walked out, I said that wasn't exactly right, because I knew it was going to go to trial. I said, when this goes to trial, I'm going to see that again. Embarrassing. When you make a faux pas in grand jury and then you get into trial and your testimony is different, this is what happens. So I'm looking at the defense table, and there's my grand jury, and I can see the highlighted parts that he's going to ram down my throat. They asked the judge, may I approach the witness? It's just like you see on TV, and he comes up and he hands me my grand jury testimony, and I see 2 paragraphs highlighted, and he said, can you read the highlighted section of your testimony? And I read it. And he says, so, were you lying then, or are you lying?
When did you stop beating your wife?
Yes, exactly. When's the last time you did a line of coke? I said, I walked out of the grand jury. I said, I realized that what I said in grand jury wasn't worded properly. And I look over at the jury, and they're like, yeah, we can see that. And that's just as an aside, that's what gets a lot of people jammed up. Just admit it. Yeah, I was in grand jury. You asked me this. I answered this way. It wasn't exactly proper. Now I'm on the stand. I thought about it, and here's me correcting myself. But it's still embarrassing because
absolutely.
Because you look like crap.
Absolutely. Back to the kind of the beginning when it started to become digital. Explain like how it went from old school to the new digital era in your experience.
Well, we got hit by a tidal wave. It was the holy shit, what the fuck happened? Oh my God, wrapped around a tornado, followed by a hurricane. If you could imagine that scenario, that's what happened. Once the internet hit, it was no holds barred, the Wild West. At that time, I transferred up to Alaska. My name got around as, hey, Kevin is the guy that works the child exploitation cases. If you have anything, call him. So the calls started rolling in. The very first case I got involved in, one of the detectives up there, Glenn, I won't use his last name, we hit it off. And at that time, we still had beepers. We set the ground rules. Listen, you will never use 911 unless it's actually an emergency. Back in the day when you had beepers, a lot of people would do 911, meaning
they just want you to call them real quick.
Yeah, or let's go to lunch. Yeah, I'm really hungry, 911 Taco Bell. But Glenn and I said, no, we only say 911 if it's really 911. So we hit this house with a search warrant, and the night before, single guy, the military guy, didn't find anything. We had his computer. The house was absolutely spotless. So the next morning, I'm sitting with the OSI, Office and Special Investigations with the Air Force. And my pager goes off, and it's 3 911s and then Glenn's number. And I'm like, holy shit, that's bad. So I call him. I can hear the police pursuit engine kicking in on his detective car when he's going light speed. He's get over to the bad guy's apartment. Something happened. The paramedics are on the way. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, I know what happened. I said, dude killed himself. So we get over there. The OSI agent jumps in my ride and blast over there. And as soon as we pull up, there's a girl there, and she's crying hysterically, and ambulance there. We go up, and we're like, hey, what happened? Hey, whatever their name is. Joe and Jane went up, and he's dead.
What do you think about when you hear an offender committing suicide? How does that make you feel?
Oh, okay. I'm conflicted on this. I am for the death penalty, but I don't wish death on anyone. How's that for a contradiction? Long story short, on the suicide thing, he was hanging from the door, hung himself with computer coax, which is poetic.
Oh, that's right. I read that in the book. Like he was telling you, look what the internet did to me.
Yeah, because when we searched the house, there was no computer coax in there. There was climbing rope. So he obviously went out and bought 25 yards of computer coax, looped around the door and around his neck. And he didn't hang himself as much as just choked himself. But he had been hanging for a while. So that evening, I'm on the way home, and Glenn calls, and he's like, how do you feel? And I admit it, I was crying. I was upset that the dude killed himself, because it was a waste. He would have went to jail for a very long time, because he was a hands-on offender, and we had proved that. Yeah. We knew that. He was a hands-on offender, so we knew he was going to go to jail for a very long time. Had
you interviewed him or spoken to him at all in person before he committed suicide?
We had.
I don't recall.
This is a big worldwide coordinated takedown. We're doing it. I don't know how many different countries, 6 or 7 countries. We're all hitting the places at the exact same time, which is cool. If you think about that, think about the coordination of that, right? So anyhow,
Yeah.
we went to the base and we had grabbed him and took him into the conference room and read him his rights. And I think the very first words out of his mouth was, "This has something to do with the computer and I want an attorney." That takes care of that. Well, he knew exactly what was happening, so he knew, but other than that, he didn't say a word. So I didn't do the computer forensics on that case. One of the folks with APD, Anchorage Police Department, and the only thing that they found on his he had wiped his computer, completely wiped it, like forensically wiped it. So he knew what he was doing, or had some help doing it. We don't know which. We did find a story on there. It's called The Visit, and it's absolutely fascinating. If you want to know from a mind of a child molester how he got started, this story details it.
It's insane. And I read it in the book, and I just think it was fascinating to watch him talk about how he evolves.
He talks about how he got his first computer and his mom got it, and he goes off to college. And after class, he would literally run back to his dorm, download child pornography, masturbate to it, and then feel so ashamed he would delete it. And then he would go a few days and he would come back and do the same thing. It was just this vicious cycle. And then he talks about molesting his niece. She was 8 years old. He talks in the story about molesting her. And he doesn't use molesting, of course, because that's offensive. And he says, well, we talked about it afterwards and she's okay with it. I'm very animated when it comes to stuff like that. And I'm literally yelling at the story going, are you fucking kidding me? You just raped your 8-year-old niece and she's okay with that. How delusional is that?
What kind of perspective do you have to believe that's reality?
Right.
Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane.
After that, it just snowballed. I don't know how many months or maybe a year later, I had a young agent come and she said, hey, we have this Air Force member and he's talking to little girls online. Do you think you could chat him up and we want to arrest him? And I'm like, yeah, I can get in touch with my inner little girl and let's see how this goes. And a funny thing happens is sitting there and I have the OSI agent. She's literally over my left shoulder, mere inches from me. And she's watching me type to this guy. How big are your tits? Oh, I just got a trainer bra, blah, blah, blah. And he's, what size is your waist? And I'm like 32. And I'm just getting ready to hit enter. And I hear the OSI agent yelling, no, stop.
Yeah.
And then the argument ensues. She's trying to tell me that 32 is too fat for a woman. And I'm telling her she's an idiot. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And guess who the idiot was? Yeah, that would have been. And she finally says, you are either a 0 or a 1. In my mind, I'm thinking, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. There's no such thing as a 0 clothing. Silly me. After I hit 0, he was like, oh, you're pretty skinny. I'm like, huh. So I had to go to the children's section, took my wife, and educated myself on sizes. And yes, Eric, there is a size 0 or a 1. So yeah, it's just started from there. And then crazy thing, at that time, Yahoo had, most people don't know this, you could name the chat room anything you wanted. There was no filter. So there was room in there titled 9-year-old sucks daddy.
Yep.
Father is for bold pussy. And when you get in there, you're like, for the love of God, how is this possible that there are rooms in here named so blatantly? Then
no one's
paying attention. Who's guarding the store? Who's guarding the store? That's what it was when the internet hit. My persona was that of a little girl for about 2 years. And then something, good or bad happened, however it happened to be. I graduated up or down. I went onto a part of the internet that's still wide open right now, and I won't name where it is. And I changed my persona to that of an adult, pimping out my grandkids. That was and still is shocking.
What made you think to do that, to take on that persona? What was the impetus?
Someone come up and gave us training about this part of the internet and said, hey, you guys might want to go in there. So I'm like, oh, all right, let me go in there and have a look and see what that's like. And I was super naive back then, so I had no idea. So you go in to these rooms, and I'll name one of the prominent room was called Kids Are Us. So that was the name of the room. And you'd go in and it'd be 150 people in there and whatever their screen name was. And they'd be talking about just raping kids. I get the question a lot. What kind of slang or what kind of code were they using? And there's not. There's no code. It was just blatant. And I'm like, okay, that's a bit breathtaking. I'm starting to educate myself. Once I got my feel for it and knew the sex talk and all that stuff, it was like that. I could sit there and talk on the phone, write a report, and chat with somebody and not miss a beat because I have a sense of what's coming next. I think I was probably first person chatting with customs undercover. Nobody else was doing it. There was no rules, there was no guidelines. When I opened an investigation, when I thought the chat was going somewhere, like somebody was going to travel up to Alaska, when I wrote my report, I would cut and paste the entire chat sessions into my report. So some of my reports were 50 or 80 pages long. Now, do you think for 1 second that my boss was reading 80 pages? Nope. Not a chance. So this is what happens. Once I get going, I got my stride going and I know what I'm doing. I'm chatting. I talk to this guy. This is going to be the first traveler case in Alaska. First one ever prosecuted. Guy flies up from California. He's flying up to get my granddaughter. Actually, I think that time the kids were 4 and 5. So this guy's coming up for a 4 and a 5-year-old. So it's getting a lot of press. My boss now knows that he needs to read my reports because people are going to be asking about this. So I get a phone call. It's not even 8 o'clock. The phone rings and you can tell by the person's voice that something's wrong. Hey, when you get a chance, you need to come up to my office. Uh-oh. Then immediately what goes to your mind? What happened today? Wait a minute. It's 7:40 in the morning. I haven't did anything wrong yet. And the next thing is, what did I do yesterday? So I go up and my boss has a very large desk. He's sitting behind it and he has my report and he doesn't stutter, but he's holding the report in his hands and I'm standing there and his face is cherry red, like he'd been holding his breath for 10 minutes. Did you read this? Talking about my report. And then he gains his composure and he said, do you see here? And he can't even say it. He said, do you see here where you used the F word the first time? You realize that you used the F word in this chat before the bad guy did. Now my mind is really wanting to say, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
And I said this, do you realize what this chat is about? We're talking about raping a 5-year-old. What part of that conversation is good? And I said, did you read down in the chat? And he says, oh yeah, but you used the F word for the first time. To this day, I'm flabbergasted about why he thought me using the word fuck when we're talking about raping a kid is somehow offensive. More offensive than talking about just raping the girl. He could have been just so shocked by the conversation that he needs some way to justify.
I would certainly describe it as a conscious, shocking report to read. Shock anybody.
No doubt. And it got so bad. They are making a big deal of this. This is the Salem witch trials, and I am going to be burned at the stake. They talked to the U.S. attorney that's going to be working this case with me, and they're like, oh no, this is not going to fly. We need to have a meeting with the U.S. attorney and get Kevin up here because he's out of control. So I'm like, man, this is bad. Literally a couple days later, we go to the U.S. Attorney's office into the U.S. Attorney's private conference room. And it just so happened that I'd been working with the U.S. Attorney's office there with a lot of investigations. So the U.S. Attorney knew me. She knew my reputation, which I'm sure helped. So it's just like a inquisition. You have Kevin, the U.S. Attorney, my group soup on one side of the table, me on the other side of the table. And they're all just like glaring at me. They're like, yes, we're going to crucify Kevin. This is it, because he used the F word when we're talking about raping a kid. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job because I threw out the F word. So the U.S. attorney comes in and she's holding my report. And she looks at the three on the other side of the table and she says, why are we here? And someone said, Kevin used the F word in this chat. And the U.S. attorney, Karen, says, have you ever listened to the recording of a call with a narcotics dealer? And she breaks it out. She says they use the fuck word for everything. It's a noun, it's a verb, it's an adjective. So why are we talking about it in this context? And the three of them look at each other like complete silence, because now they're baffled. We don't understand. Why are you applying this rules to a child exploitation case when it doesn't apply to any other investigation?
How did that make you feel? Obviously relieved, but how did that make you feel to hear that the U.S. attorney herself agreed with you?
I wanted to get up and do the happy dance on the desk. You get that euphoria for a few seconds, and then you're back to, okay, my group supervisor and the office boss are still in the mindset that I threw out the F word when we were talking about raping a kid.
Did knowing that your supervisors basically didn't support you because they didn't understand or didn't care to understand, did that affect you going forward?
It did not. When you start doing any kind of a new type of investigation, whatever happened to be Bitcoin, child exploitation, undercover child exploitation, and people don't understand it, there's always going to be someone out there, some detractor out there saying, well, you should do this, you should do that. So at that time, my undercover got onto a child exploitation distribution list. Yes, this happened on Facebook. Hey, add your email to my list and we'll send you pictures and videos. And I'm like, this can't be happening. Sure enough, they're filling up my email box with pictures and images, and it's like shooting fish in a barrel.
So they're sending you CSAM
by the
straight, chargeable, 100%, not even, and no safeguards, no encryption, no just, hey, this is a Facebook group.
It was a Facebook group. They weren't sharing it on Facebook, but it said in the header right there, hey, add your email to this list and we'll send you pictures and videos of child pornography. And I'm like, okay. So I was writing search warrants as fast as I could. We're sending 40 warrants a week. It never stopped. It was nonstop.
So you focused mostly on traveler cases. That was your thing. You were a chatter as an investigator.
I was and we're still doing possession and production. If I didn't have 10 different investigations going at the same time, then at any given time I'm chatting with at least 2 or 3 good targets that I know that investigation is going to go somewhere, whether it's a local target or somebody flying up from out of state. We're running and gunning. It was literally not nonstop.
When you would do a search warrant on a traveler, would you serve a warrant on their residence? Let's say they fly into Alaska, you meet them at the airport. Do you have a team ready to do a warrant at their residence then?
Yep.
Yeah. And now when you're at the residence, do you seize the computers and all that stuff?
Yep.
Once you seize all the evidence from the warrant, then who looks through it all back then at this point?
That's a good question. Imagine me calling you and you're busy like I am, and I'm like, hey, Eric, hey, can you hit Joe Blow's house on the search warrant and seize all his electronics and do the forensics? And you're like, Kevin, I love you, but we'll do the search warrant and get ready for that big box because you're doing the forensics. So yes, most of the time they would ship the stuff up to us and say, have a good time with that.
Now, just let me get a picture of this. So are you doing computer forensics at the same time you're doing investigations? Are you doing computer forensics on your own investigations and then helping other people occasionally if they need it?
I am doing it all, not occasionally, Eric. I'm doing all the forensics for the Army and the Air Force, some forensics for the trooper, and forensics on my own cases, and doing the undercover.
What's the mindset that gets you to be able to do that, Kevin? What put you in that? What put you in that place?
I don't know. I will say I can't tell you how many times my wife called and said, are you coming home for dinner? And I'd be like, what time is it? And she's like, it's 11 o'clock at night.
Did your wife know what you were doing? Did she know the details or?
No. She knew when my persona was that of a little girl. She had actually came to a couple of my trials and watched me testify. Strangely enough, a lot of my cases went to trial. A lot of them went to trial.
I don't think that's strange. Now it would be strange to go to trial, but back then, like you said, it was the Wild West. It was this new frontier. This is some new crime that I would imagine all the defense attorneys were licking their chops to be like, hey, let's fight this. And figure out how to do it.
And that's pretty much how it was. So Bonnie had been to, I think, 3 of my trials and watched. But once I started doing the adult stuff, she didn't come to the trials. We didn't talk about it. We'll fast forward a number of years. When she was in the hospital, somebody came up and we were talking about the online undercover. And after that person left, Bonnie said, listen, she said, don't ever talk about that stuff in front of me again. Ever. She said, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know it because it's shocking. And to know that your spouse is doing that And the way that you have to talk to do that, it's shocking. It shocks me. I can't tell you how many times that I've sat at my desk writing a search warrant with tears streaming down my face. And other people in the office are there and nobody is saying a word, because when I'm chatting, and this is how my mindset was, when I'm chatting, my mind is 2 or 3 steps ahead. So I'm reading what they're saying, but I'm not digesting it. When I have to go back and I have to read the chat for the search warrant, fucking kills me, because I'm thinking, why do I have to chat like this? This is not normal. This is not me. But when I'm in the zone, it is me. When I'm talking to someone, I am a child molester. If you're going to understand a bank robber, you have to become a bank robber. Not literally, but you have to know, just like it says, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's got to be a duck. So that's where I was. I could be.
What does it take to do that, Kevin? What does it take
I don't
to
know,
do that?
something fucked up in my head or something. I don't know, but I was damn good at it. But I could turn it. I could turn it off.
Why?
Just
You can turn it on, turn it off.
But
why were you so good at it? Why do you think?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know.
Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that you know, how noble this is, and you've gone from watching the sea rise up and down to doing absolutely world-changing work?
It probably helped that I was at the ground floor. I followed the rise. So I was like, I know how this started. I'm riding the wave right now. I know I can do this, and I'm the best at it. There's no one else doing it at that time, or very few people.
I love the confidence, but I also think it speaks to your passion for the work you were doing, because you don't put those long hours in. You don't neglect family. You don't hurt yourself. You don't do it. If there's no purpose, if there's no value for you as a human being to be doing it, why would you do that to yourselves? I believe, just like all the people that I know that have amazing work ethics, I think it's the passion. But the problem is when you're a passionate person about anything, it quite honestly means you're an emotional person, which means that it can affect you. Oftentimes people that are emotional get affected by this stuff more than people that are very stoic. I have to give you kudos and say that is an extremely difficult thing to do.
I could always turn it on and turn it off. There was a point where I knew I was always been self-aware of what's happening with my body to a certain extent. I do my blood pressure and cholesterol and all that stuff. There would be times during the year when I was like, it's time for a break. So my break was Vegas. I'm a massive Vegas fan. So we would go to Vegas twice a year. And my wife and I would fly in. I would lock up my gun and my badge in the safe, and that's it. It is drunken debauchery. So we'd fly in 2 full days and then fly out. During the fly-in day and then the 2 days, literally, Eric, that was it. It was drinking and gambling until 5 or 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. And that was my release, which obviously is not good. But then I didn't notice, and this was a bit of hindsight, I stopped watching the news. I stopped getting in the newspaper. I used to read the newspaper front to back religiously. I stopped getting the newspaper. And there was a time that it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was an investigation where I found a live victim. I found a victim. I think it was on a Friday, and I was working with a supervisor with Anchorage Police Department. And I'm like, hey, we need to find this kid. It was on a Saturday, 8 o'clock, and they call, come in, we think we found her. And I'm like, all right, here it goes. So at that time, my granddaughter was, I can't remember how old she was, maybe 5 or 6. And she comes up, and I got to maintain my composure here. And she comes up to me, and she grabs my leg. I just come out of the bathroom, just got dressed, showered up and everything. And she grabs my leg, and she looks up at me, and she says, shit. Sorry about that.
Don't apologize, Kevin. You have nothing to apologize for, sir. Nothing at all.
She said, Pappy, are you going to save that little girl? And something clicked in my head and said, those kids are real. I know, as bizarre as that sounds, I never put much thought into the kids being real. The pictures are there, the movies are there. I know they're horrendous. I've seen them. Yeah. I've seen millions of images, no lie, millions of images, tens of thousands of videos of some of the most horrific stuff you can ever imagine. And it doesn't hit me until my granddaughter says, Pappy, you're going to save that little girl. And I cried the whole way into the police department, the whole way,
Oh.
20 minutes.
So you, at that point, you're like, wait a minute, these images are depicting actual children that have pappies and daddies and mommies
Yeah.
and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. And that was like a punch in the stomach after Thanksgiving dinner.
How long have you been doing that work when this happened?
Better than 10 years.
Wow. So you went 10 years just clinical the whole way through.
Yes. There you go.
Wow.
That's the term I was looking for. Clinical. Yes, that's exactly what it was. Just like clinical.
I tried to be clinical as I could. I'm just an emotional guy. But yeah, that's the thing. The people that I know that were really successful and had longevity in their careers were able to do exactly that. They were able to just, okay, this is this. I'm describing this like I'm describing the color of a stolen vehicle.
Yeah.
Like they can just turn off. I can't compartmentalize emotion. That's the problem. I never could, but I tried. But that's a skill. Being clinical is an absolute skill.
Back then, it was just completely clinical, just like you said. It was like a doctor telling a patient they had a brain tumor and then was going to die. But then after that, I did notice that there was a change. And I did come home one time and I told my wife, I said, this is killing me. I said, it is killing me. I got to do something else. And she said, do something else. I said, what am I going to do? My first part of my career, I worked large-scale narcotics investigations. Besides that, there's somebody on the DEA task force, so I can't do that. I don't want to do fraud cases because that's like watching paint dry or grass grow. And I don't want to do immigration cases. I'm not the political guy. You want to talk about immigration, talk to somebody else. I am the guy that's passionate about child exploitation. I just, keep going. And much to my detriment, I did.
Where do you go after you do this work in law enforcement to feel fulfilled that you're making a difference when you've done the most important work, in my opinion, that you could do as a police officer, as law enforcement, is to protect children, the kids that don't have their own voice, and to save the little girls, right? So she tells you this, you're driving into work and you're crying. What happens when you get to work? You said you noticed a change. What was it? Was it the inability to be clinical now? Was it?
No, I could still be clinical, but there was just something in my mind there that was starting to affect me more. I said earlier, when I'm writing a search warrant, I was crying sometimes at my desk for that. And then I remember one time I was in the lab with Angela, and it's around Christmas time, and we're doing exams, and Christmas music's on, and we're looking at these pictures of kids being raped, and I'm like, in hell. Okay. No Christmas music when you're looking at kids being raped, because you don't want to associate those two. Put on any kind of music except Christmas music, because I'm sitting at my desk again crying. Now I know that it's affecting me more because you're listening to Silent Night where a kid gets raped, and then I'm sitting there crying going, Jesus, this is bad.
And then in the future, when you hear it, when you're at home and Christmas and Silent Night comes on,
right,
what happens? There you go. You're right back there watching the video
you have that
again.
You have that flashback. And that
having that association is something I learned early on. What I would do is I always put on classical music and the sound of rain. So I had there was like a website called Rainy Mood, and I'd put that on and I put classical music on. And the reason I did that is because out in the wild, I enjoy classical music, but I would never tune into it. I would never go seek it out. So I added the rain to make sure that the association would be, I have to hear classical music while it's raining. Luckily that hasn't happened yet, Kevin, but at some point in my life, I'm sure I'll hear classical music while it's raining, and I will. Well,
that's brilliant. I was having a conversation with somebody a month or so ago, and they said, hey, when I'm doing this stuff, I put on my playlist. And I told them, I said, that's a bad idea. Bad idea. I said, you do not want one of your favorite songs associated with this video of someone raping a kid.
So tell me how it started to affect you personally.
I still slept good. I think the fact that I was even working longer hours, if you can believe that.
No, that makes sense to me. That absolutely, based on what you're telling me and the way that you already had a great work ethic and passion, of course. That's basically throwing gasoline on the fire of your endeavor. It's boom. Yeah, of course you worked longer hours, Kevin.
Hey, I'm naked on fire running down the street. Let me jump into this pool of gasoline. What's the worst that could happen?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I just started working more, and then
head down, just grinding it out.
And then when it starts getting real, we're still in Alaska, and she gets diagnosed with cancer, and it's not that bad. We had been trying to get out here. I'm in Virginia now, Northern Virginia. So we transferred out here to Virginia, We got out here, we found an oncologist, and he did blood tests and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, yeah, we'll see you in 6 months. So we went back in 6 months, and then he's, oh, we'll see you in a year. They do the blood test, and we get a call from the oncologist, and he says, you need to come in to the office, like right now. So we go in, and he says, you're going in the hospital tomorrow. You have leukemia. And we were like, what's happening? Literally, we went from I'll see you in a year to you're going in the hospital tomorrow because you have full-blown leukemia. So, wow, that was a shock, of course. So over the next year, 2013, we spent more time in the hospital than out. But what am I doing? What am I doing on my free time at the hospital? Yep, really. I have my undercover laptop and I am chatting. Now, mind you, in between all of this, at nighttime, there is holy hell happen. Some of the drugs that Bonnie was on wasn't reacting right. She was having massive hallucinations. So I was getting 1 to 3 hours a night of sleep. I was living in the room with her. I was going home every third day to get clean clothes. I was literally showering in her room. So I was living at the hospital. And in between that,
Good for you.
when stuff wasn't going, I was chatting. And then when Bonnie was out of the hospital, we were arresting people. So it was just this shit show between tests and cancer and chemo and bone marrow. And I forget the name when they replace your cells or whatever it is. That part I'm trying to block out of my head. So she's in the hospital, all these night terrors and everything's happening, and I'm dealing with that and falls, and she's not eating, and she's delusional, and it's hard.
So was all the work you were doing chatting at the hospital, was that a distraction for you from the emotion you were feeling about your wife's situation?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. That's what it was. But imagine the distraction of watching your wife literally dying in front of your eyes to talking about guys coming into raping your kids. So there's no pleasantries dividing that. It's just the nightmare happening on a train wreck at the same time. On top of that, my son was here and it was going really bad. It was causing more stress. So I have 3 stressors happening all at once. There was no relief. If shit wasn't happening at the hospital, I wasn't chatting, I was coming home. It was super stressful at the house. We were arresting people at work. Just looking, hindsight being 2020, I look back and saying, Jesus, what was happening there? So this is what was happening there. Bonnie passed away at the end of December of 2013. And we had the funeral up in Ohio on a Saturday, and I was back to work that next Monday. I remember walking in the office and my boss saying, are you okay to be here? And I said, I can't be at home. Can't be at home. My son had left on really bad terms. I hate silence. I need some kind of music or tone in the background. Saying silence is deafening, that's me. I told Patrick I can't be at home. Nobody's there. Every time I walk in the house, the only thing I see and hear and smell is Bonnie. And I don't know when this happened. I don't know the date or anything like that. I just know that I went home on a Friday and I'm sitting on the couch, which has since gone, by the way. We've completely remodeled. I was sitting on the couch and I had my gun on the end table and I'd been crying for 2 or 3 hours straight, non-stop, uncontrollably. I can't get a hold of myself. On top of that, I hadn't been sleeping. I had a dream about Bonnie. I don't think I've ever told anybody this. And she's literally standing next to me by the bed with the embalming port in her arm. Wow. Hmm.
It's okay, Kevin. It's okay. Sorry to bring that up. Thank you for your vulnerability, though. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I hadn't been sleeping. I hadn't slept for 3 days. Not a wink in 3 days. After that dream, or nightmare, whatever you want to call it, I couldn't go up into the bedroom because I didn't want to have that dream again. It scared the bejesus. So I come home that Friday, I'm on the couch and my gun's there on the end table and I'm listening to music. And I say, after this song is over, I'm going to kill myself. Bonnie's gone. I'm just going to do it. There was no forethought to it. There was no days before I thought about suicide. It was just in that moment. People need to realize something about suicide. I was a big proponent that suicide was the coward's way out until I was there. You don't realize until you've hit absolute rock bottom what's happening. So that's what that people don't understand. That's what I didn't understand. You think about, are you suicidal? Call the suicide hotline. And that happens a lot. But there's also cases like my case where I wasn't suicidal. It was just when this song ends, and I'd never thought about it before, I'm gonna grab my pistol, stick it under my chin, one shot, and that'll be it. I'll never forget this because this is burned into my psyche now. The phone rings, and it's sitting next to me, my iPhone, and it's 7:00. And this is the quote that goes through my first thought in my head is, who the fuck is calling me at 7:00 on Friday? Typically, I don't answer my phone if I don't know the number. I just don't. But for some reason, call it divine information, angel on my shoulder, fate, God, whatever you want to call it, I answered the phone. It was somebody from the peer support program. And this person doesn't want me to mention their name because if you know anything about peer support, they're not supposed to call. You are supposed to approach them. But for some reason, whatever reason, and this person, they've been in peer support for a long time, and this is the first time that they ever called someone. For some reason, they decided to call me and talk me off the ledge. I didn't mention being suicidal. I didn't mention suicide at all. Matter of fact, I didn't tell this person. We had met for lunch and a couple other things. But I didn't tell him about a year later that he had prevented my suicide.
Oh, wow. He never knew.
He never knew. And when I told him, wow, it took his breath away. The only reason I'm here right now is because of you. That's it. The only reason is because of that phone call. If it was not for that person calling me, I would be dead right now. So I don't do it. I have composed myself. I went into work and I called the child exploitation group. I called everybody out and I told my story. I told them. And a very good friend of mine was crying because she said, how did I miss this? I said, there was nothing there to miss. And that's what people need to realize. Sometimes there's nothing there. I wasn't suicidal for days, weeks, or months. It was in that second, in that instant. And that was it. So there was nothing to miss. Yeah, there's a couple of things that I learned that's just human nature about the suicide and about people going through stressful situations. People try to avoid you. At least that was my experience. And that makes the situation worse. My wife died. I come back in the office and people say, hey, Kevin, how's it going? And I would say, what do you think I said? It's going great. I'm fine. Now, who in their right mind thinks I am doing fine? I had just buried my wife. We'd been together for 35 years. Just buried my wife 2 or 3 days ago. Or people would just walk by and not say anything. And this is what I tell people. It doesn't change. Just because my wife has died, I'm the same person. Why would you change your attitude towards me? There's nothing different. I walk by you in the morning and you just turn your head or something like that. And then you're thinking, what's wrong with me? Is my zipper down? Did I change something because my wife just died?
It's interesting to me that you say that you were with a woman for 35 years. You must have met her when you were a very young man.
High school sweethearts.
High school sweetheart. Your brains weren't even fully developed when you met, and you became an adult and solidified with her in your life. How can you say, honestly, Kevin, how can you say you're the same person now that she died? Because she is a part of you. She'll always be a part of you. I don't know what your relationship was with her, but 35 years, that is very unusual nowadays. That is absolutely remarkable. It's commendable. And of course you want normalcy. I would venture to guess you were craving normalcy. Jesus, I just want to be normal, right?
Yeah, and then a number of days later after the suicide. I didn't take any time off. But then I get back in, and I had a guy on the line that, as I say, was just begging to be arrested. He wouldn't give up, which we eventually arrested him. I wasn't there. I couldn't do it anymore. I would get on it to try to chat, and I would just start crying uncontrollably. I couldn't do it.
What would you be thinking? What would cause you to
Just
cry?
the thought of talking about raping kids again.
What changed?
Bonnie passed away, and that was it. That was the switch. Something in my mind said, that's it, dude. You're not doing this shit anymore. You're not doing it. So I struggled through the last, I think, 2 investigations I had chatting. We arrested those folks, and that was it. The chat was done. So I focused on training. So I was the training coordinator, so I was traveling around the country, around the world teaching. So that was good, but I couldn't do the chat anymore. So that was it. I just stopped.
So then where did you go from there at that point? How did you finish your career? Did you retire from there?
Yeah, I retired in 2015. I figured I was going to work until I figured I'd be the person that just died at their desk, because that was me. I loved my job. I was so passionate about my job. Like I said, I worked so ridiculous amount of hours, which was, hindsight being 2020, just completely stupid. But here we are.
Yes.
Yeah, I figured I'd just die at my desk. But then I decided, that's it. I'm out. I'm going to retire as soon as I can. At the end of 2015, that was it. So I jumped ship. I met my current wife, who's also a lifesaver. Thanks, Suzanne. I told myself when I first started working these investigations, if I ever dreamt about it, I would quit. But I was, knock on wood, I was lucky enough, I never dreamt about it, never had flashbacks.
After work, you could turn it off. When you went home, turn it off?
What I couldn't turn off was, and this is a perfect example, I've since remarried. So first wife, Bonnie, and I, we walk into Walmart and we see a guy, grandfather, sitting with a little girl, and instantly both of us are like, did you see that? It's obviously innocent grandfather with his granddaughter, and I'm instantly thinking, oh, there's a perv trying to rape this little girl. That's what I couldn't turn. That part of me, even today, doesn't get turned off. But the pictures never affected me like that. The only one that haunts me was a video of this guy raping this little boy, and he has him tied over a quilt wrap, and his wrists are bound to his ankles, and it's set to music. That one pops up occasionally. Yeah, that one haunts me. This is the weird thing. When I started these back in 97, looking at the pictures and stuff, pictures weren't that bad. As bad as that sounds, the pictures weren't that bad. They were naked kids, the little girls with their legs spread, and maybe the camera's focal point on their pubic area, or it was a little boy with an erection, and that's what you would get.
Yeah. And a lot of them were clearly taken back in the 70s. All the people in the pictures were probably all grown up by now. That's what I recall, the early stuff. That kind of correlates with what you said earlier. It didn't seem like it was real. It's not humanized. Back then, it wasn't HD and it wasn't 4K.
As time went on, of course, I can walk you through the progression of pictures. They went from the innocent, call them innocent, as just the singular person in the picture, to multiple kids, and then there's hands-on, and then there's bestiality thrown in there, and then there's videos, and it just progressed to where we're at now. That's what happened. That's what I have floating around in my head.
Let me ask you this. Do you acknowledge that your perspective on the world is skewed? Because you lived in the world with these people. It's not just you were chatting with them. You were getting into their minds. You were learning about the depravity. You swam in the waters for so many years. Do you think that changes your perspective?
Oh, yeah. My perspective on people has definitely changed. It is skewed, and it's bad. Trying to get the word out about this stuff is the hardest thing, and I've always been a big advocate of that. I've never been an advocate of sugarcoating this, and that's probably why I'm not mainstream. Listen, these kids are being raped, as compared to somebody that's politically correct saying, yeah, we understand it's bad and kids are being sexually abused. In my opinion, you're doing everybody in this job a disservice when you're sugarcoating this.
100,000%. Yes, I couldn't agree with you more.
There's a fine line between being politically correct and to where I'm at, and you have to find that happy medium. But you definitely need to be a little bit more colorful when you're talking than just saying, oh, this is bad and children are being abused.
This is a difficult conversation. This topic is so important. Talking with you and all the other people that I'm interviewing that have been affected by this stuff one way or another, it just shows that it's happening. It's helpful to know that there's other people feeling the same thing.
And that's why I wrote my book. During my career, I was a shit magnet for these cases. I got the cases where the other child molesters were like, that dude's a freak.
Okay, I just want to really quickly, I want to define a shit magnet for if you're not law enforcement, because I know they are out there among us. You don't know them. You wouldn't know it until you work with them. Every single call that they go to turns into a dumpster fire, a car accident, homicide, triple felony warrants, and all it was a loose dog was the call they went to. That's what a shit magnet is.
Yes, that's actually perfect. So that was me. People were like, you need to write a book. So I wrote the book. The rough draft was finished in 2018, but I had to step away for a couple years. It was killing me.
I was going to ask you, was it hard to write the book, to bring all that back up?
It was. When you're writing, this isn't like fiction. The storyline is there. So there's no characters to make up. There's no fiction part of it. It's all real life. I lived this. So it's not, I have to think about what did Randy do to Cindy? No, it was all there. But you're still going back and you're rereading it. And it came to a point where I was done. I said, I can't do it. I'm sitting in my office at the desk where I am now, crying for the last 2 hours, and I've read 3 paragraphs. So I let it go. And then Suzanne, thank you, Suzanne, said, hey, are you going to finish that book? So I finished it in end of 2021. So it was released last year, 2022. I decided I was going to write the book differently. I'm going to write the book just like I'm having a conversation with you, just the way I'm telling this story. At the end of each chapter, I'm going to put in what I called my thoughts. And it's something like, why did this happen? Why did that happen? I did not want to sugarcoat it because this is what I think. If you're going to go up on the Hill and advocate for a law change, I think you should take my book and give it to whatever senator, congressman, representative you're talking to and say, listen, read this. You really want to know what happens out there, read this. If you're a school teacher or anybody that wants to know what's really happening in the world when you're talking about child exploitation, read this. If you're in law enforcement and you're thinking about going into this field, this is what I think everybody should do. If you're a supervisor of the computer forensic unit or the child exploitation unit and you get somebody new that wants to join your squad, I think you should hand them my book, tell them, read this, come back. If you still want a spot in the squad, then we can talk.
Hunter of the damned. Why are these people damned?
Because they're thought of the worst. Whatever you hear about happening to child molesters in prison is 100% accurate or worse.
So, Hunter of the damned, talk to me about the subtext, a walk through hell.
If you're working these cases for any amount of time, it is literally like a walk through hell. If you look into hell long enough, the devil's going to look back. I can tell you that I have seen pure evil. I'm not a religious person, but somebody asked me this one time in one of my online classes, and they were religious. What do you think of us doing this? This is what I told them. Listen, I've seen the face of pure evil. Therefore, there has to be pure good. There's an opposite to everything. There's on, off, black, white, up, down. I've seen pure evil, so there has to be pure. There just has to be.
Any advice to any of those investigators who did not get a chance to read your book before they started this job? Any ways to cope with what they're going to be dealing with?
Get friends outside of this field.
Oh my God, agreed.
It doesn't matter what kind of law enforcement you're in. If you're in the traffic unit, a homicide unit, fraud unit, when you get together with your friends, you talk about work. No matter where the conversation starts, yep. Oh, hey, I see you remodeled your house. You got your lawn resodded. You repainted your car after the accident. It always loops back around to, so I was working that case the other day. What do you think about that guy? Yep. Always. Let's get the niceties out of the way. Yes,
we can talk about work.
Yeah, get friends outside of this field. Yes, you need that, especially for this. You need the break. You need sanity break. And I was never an advocate for time limits in this field. But hindsight being 2020, there absolutely should be time limits.
What do you think the time limit should be?
I think 5 years. And 5 years is going to be a long time.
5?
I think 5, and then get out of it for 2 years. And if you want to come back in, you come back in. There should not be any more people like me. There should not be people that work online undercover for 11 years straight. Eric, that's 11 years with no break. There should not be any other people like me. It's too much. And I tell people I have every PTSD. I've got them all. There's so much stuff wrong in my brain that shouldn't be.
Kevin, if you could go back and give your younger self advice at the beginning of all this, what would you do?
Don't do it.
What would you tell yourself? Even in the face of all the amazing work you've done? All the predators
Yeah,
you
I have
street?
to ask myself, was it worth it? Personally, just on a personal level.
Yes.
Forget about whatever and all the good stuff I've done and saved the kids. Was it worth it psychologically to me? And the answer to that is I don't know. So I'll go back and say, I wouldn't say don't do it. I would say don't do it as long as you did. At that time when I was in Alaska and I told Bonnie that I have to quit, it's killing me, that's when I should have quit. Yeah, that's when I should have been smart enough to say, no, I don't care if I'm going to do fraud cases or change tires. That's it. I should have dead stop. I should have quit. I told one person when I was still working, they needed to get out of it because I could see it changing them. And one person just recently who I was talking to at a Zoom meeting, and I could hear it in their voice. And I said, you need a break. I'm sure nobody has told you, but I can hear it in your voice. Your personality has changed. Your speech changed. You're not sleeping. And I'm telling them this face to face. I said, dude, you need to quit. I said, this is going to kill you. And it took them 2 years. They finally did quit. Yeah.
Good for you for being able to do that. And we'd mentioned it earlier when you said that gal felt bad because, I didn't see it. And you said there was nothing to see, but you saw it in somebody. You saw it in somebody else.
I didn't show it outwardly when it started affecting me. If Bonnie would have been cognizant enough about law enforcement, she would have said, hey, I see the changes in you. That's hard for a wife to say too, because imagine anybody in law enforcement, their wife saying,
absolutely,
this is changing you. You need to quit doing what you're doing. Inevitably, 99.9% people are going to say, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what I deal with at work. I'm fine.
If there was a support system like there is now, peer support, do you think you would have been open to it?
When I first started in this field, I would have gave massive pushback because I was bulletproof. But as time went on, I knew it was affecting me. I could tell that it was affecting me. I would have been more attuned to it. Yeah.
What's the proudest moment of your career?
It was, so in my book, I changed the bad guys' names because they don't deserve a voice in my book. He was the first traveler case, and that is the investigation where my boss was giving me hell for using the F-bomb. It went to trial. It was really stressful. They had a couple other people doing forensics on it. It was this big case. It was making big news. It was the first traveler case in Alaska. It was guaranteed to go to trial. So it did. It went to trial, and I was up on the stand for 4 hours. You're just getting bombarded with all these questions. He gets convicted. After the verdict came in, it was guilty, which was awesome. I walked in the back of the courtroom, and I stood against the wall, and I cried for about 15 minutes because it was tough. And the trial was tough, too. Here's vindication because my two bosses wanted to crucify me. Other stuff in the U.S. Attorney's Office was going on with me. The trial was really taxing. There's people on the jury that's crying. And then the foreman and one other person approached the judge afterwards and called the attorney, Steve and I, who was the attorney that I was working with, called us over and thanked us for how we put on the trial and thanked me personally because they were like, yeah, I know what you went through and you did a fabulous job. And that was, that was one of the proudest moments of my life because that was pure vindication.
Fantastic.
Because the judge is standing there too. And these two people, and I'm like, yes, I'm not the Antichrist because I dropped the F-bomb and I didn't do all this other stuff wrong, and he got 36 years. Yeah.
Kevin basically lived this twice. All these things that he wrote about in his book, he lived twice. Once the first time when he was actually doing it, and the second time when he was reliving it to write about it. That's incredible. So thank you so much. And just understand how talking about this and just can bring up old feelings. It's a feat that not everybody can do. Absolute kudos to you for putting everything down into words to pass on to the next generation as well. You are a human being. This isn't just some nameless, faceless person. You're a human being, and you were affected by it personally, mentally, emotionally. So thank you for sharing that, because in sharing, if we keep the conversation going, then things can start to change. So
thank you.
Thank you.
The last thing I'll do, I'll put in my gratuitous plug for my book, Hunter the Damned to Walk Through Hell. Don't buy it off of Amazon because it's ridiculously expensive. If you want a copy, go to my website, knsteaching.com. You order it from me, you get a signed copy, and it's $33 with shipping. So there you go.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for listening. But before I go, I just wanted to let you know that the FBI reported by March 21st of 2023, more law enforcement officers died by suicide than by in the line of duty incidents. And that's just unacceptable. If you or someone you know, someone close to you, may be having suicidal thoughts, there is a new national number that you can call for help. A lot of people are not aware of this. It is 988. Just like 911, but it's for suicide prevention. You can call or you can text. Thank you so much for listening to Harmless the podcast. Your support means more to me than I could ever possibly express. If you like this podcast and the work that I do, please consider sharing this podcast with people that you know, getting the word out, moving the needle. And also, please consider donating to the organization that is supporting me in this very personal endeavor of mine, the Innocent Justice Foundation. I am so grateful for the work that they do, supporting heroes doing this job with their SHIFT program. And as always, if you know somebody who needs to hear this podcast, please share it with them. If you need for them to hear it anonymously, do not hesitate to email me at harmlessthepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you.